full drama that captured all of us in a sudden awe. In Qatar, never experienced this kind of the Qatari or the local residents have never experienced this kind of war zone. So that 30 minutes, there was loud noise around because Al-Udeid, the airbase is just 30 kilometers away from my place where I'm staying, and it's in central Doha. So the noise was very deafening, and I could see the lights and the flying all over the sky. So all of a sudden, first of all, we never experienced this kind of thing. So the sirens blew, and it happened that there was announcement that everybody should be inside their house, and that created a lot of panic among the local residents, and more so people came out also to witness, and they were capturing the photographs, the videos to make those short reels and all. There was excitement as well as some kind of awe, especially the families, the children's were never been into this kind of situation in Doha, known for its very calm and peaceful environment. So this was because Iran Iran sent those missiles, and then people were expecting why Iran, because Iran has been a very close friend of Qatar. Starts from long years back, but 2017 was an event when the Saudi-led embargo on Qatar. When Iran stepped in, and Iran helped Qatar in a lot way, logistics, and whether it was motivating Qatar to be on their own. So people in Qatar, they never had hope that Iran would be targeting the US airbase in Doha. They always thought that it could be Saudi Arabia, it could be UAE, and it could be Bahrain, but not Qatar, because Qatar was never on the mind of the local Qataris, the residents, the expats who were living here. So that evening, I think everybody would remember, or everybody would never going to forget that 30 minutes, odd minute that had happened in the life of everyone who are based in Qatar.
But to other analysts, it may not be surprising. Qatar holds one of the biggest US bases in the region. Can you explain to our viewers the purpose of the base, and what does it actually do for the Americans?
Okay, what I feel is why there was some kind of talks going around in the local circles that why Iran chose Qatar to bomb the US airbase. Definitely, they have the largest airbase in this region. It was 10,000. And the reason, what everybody thought, what I personally feel, is that being Qatar as a friend, Qatar a friend of Iran, so Iran must have thought that we could settle it, because it's a minor skirmishes. I mean, not that any death news, and nothing had happened with the civilians. So attacking Saudi or attacking bases in, let's say, in UAE or Bahrain could have complicated the situation, because Iran doesn't share a very good bonding with the Saudi Arabia or Bahrain or UAE. And UAE and Bahrain, as everybody knows, they are into the accord with the Abraham Accord with Israel. So Qatar always found that that Iran is very close to them, despite the fact that the other the West Asian countries, the Middle East countries are always, there is a sense of insecurity when we talk about Iran with others, but with Qatar there is always a sense of friendship, sense of calmness. So I think that why Iran chose Qatar, because of the camaraderie, or they could settle it. They could settle it of the field that okay, we are sorry that we did it, but our target was not Qatar. Our target was the US airbase, whom we don't allow this. So that was one point of agenda they want to drive in.
Yeah, we saw that this attack on Qatari sovereignty. We saw the Prime Minister speak earlier on and yesterday in regards to this, where he said he will take this up at the highest levels, and they have a right to defend their sovereign nation. In regards to this attack on Qatar itself, it seemed very well orchestrated. Even Trump alluded to in his social media posting that they knew where the missiles were going to come, where they're going to land, and it was all very well coordinated in something that was similar to when where the Iranians attacked in regards to the assassination of the General Soleimani a few years back. Now, as Donald Trump in his own language has said, I mean, they've let it out, the frustration is gone. Where do you see the ceasefire going? We've seen still barrages of missiles this morning between the two so-called countries who are supposedly to be in a point of ceasefire, but actually carrying on the attack, much to the frustration of Donald Trump.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there's the ceasefire. When you're talking about ceasefire, there's the important hashtag that is going around, the keyword of ceasefire: Iran and Israel, and mediated by Qatar and US with the help of them. Today there was an unexpected holiday in Qatar, because after the things that had happened last evening, so there was a declared holiday. Schools were shut over here, but yet there is an awe. I mean, the people are still thinking this ceasefire is something that can be fragile, and as you have said that there are a lot of attacks, a lot of missiles that are being hurled towards Iran, or Iran doing it on Israel, which the Iranian government, they have denied that at all, that the missiles the morning. The ceasefire, it is still a 50-50. I mean, nobody is still believing it, nobody is still trusting it, because Iran always said that there is a mistrust. There is a mistrust with Israel, because no matter what the agreement comes into play, this ceasefire won't exist. So in Qatar, general, we talk about the public. I mean, they still are into a double mind whether this ceasefire will work. Today, Qatari Prime Minister, he held a press conference in the presence of Lebanese Prime Minister, and I would say that he stressed upon that, and he also said that
I think we have that press conference, and we will try to find that press conference, and hopefully we can play the press conference between the Prime Minister when he met with the Lebanese. But sorry, do carry on.
Yeah. So when the Prime Minister says that they didn't expect Iran to do this attack on the US airbase, he said that it's a scar on the relationship between Iran and Qatar. So we all agree, nobody expected Iran to do this on Qatar. Again, the vital question is why Iran chose Qatar. As I said, that Qatar, being a very good friend of Iran, is a very good friend of Qatar. So they must have thought, the Iranian government must have thought, that we could settle it, we could make an understanding with Qatar, that it was not Qatar, but it was the USA who was the target. And that's the reason we chose you.
We had other global leaders attend the G7 last week. There was a fair across the world, and we had also the UN General Secretary Guterres actually saying that he fears a regional war. I mean, it seemed very real yesterday when Iran attacked Qatar, another sovereign nation. It also attacked sites in Iraq, another sovereign country.
Yeah.
That kind of prophecy of a regional war seemed very real. And again, as you mentioned earlier, we're not very clear right now. We're not out of the woods. Do you think that we're still at that perspective that there may be a regional tension going on, which may escalate into a regional war?
Well, yes, there is a sense of fear still. Why? I would say because it's economy. It is economy of the oil and gas, and that's what basically the Israel chipping in, Israel creating an issue over there in the Middle East, and now everybody has that sense of fear, whether it is Saudi Arabia, whether it is Qatar, or the GCC countries. I'm talking about the UAE, Kuwait, even Iraq. So this factor of oil, the factor of gas, those things, the economy has a major role to play in. So Qatar doesn't want war. Even Saudi doesn't want war. This tension or this conflict has been imposed upon by someone from, let's say, Israel. Israel poked Iran. I believe that Iran also is a very peace-loving country, and why they created this problem on 13th of June of this year, and that marked the beginning of this wide impact on the local populace. They are started thinking that it could be a war, it could be a tension that would going to stay forever. because now today morning the ceasefire has been broken. Nobody really respected it. President Donald Trump had got very furious with Israel, and obviously he doesn't want this because he wants peace. When the Qatar's Emir, His Highness Sheikh Tamim, had a word with the president, he doesn't want this war to go on. But some force like Israel creating this kind of tension among the Middle East in the GCC. So that's why I feel, I mean, there could be a prospect of a war. There could be a prospect of a conflict that could go on with Israel.
Yeah, so, obviously one of the root of all of this is what's happening in Palestine. We have a report here, Gaza in Khan Yunis have said that they wanted peace in the region itself. So Palestine is kind of at the kind of root of all of this. So Gaza, again, in Khan Yunis, welcomed the ceasefire between Iran and Israel on June 24, expressing hopes for peace and calling for international community to extend a similar truce to Gaza. The residents also urged global powers to help and end an ongoing violence and suffering in the region. So we're going to have a watch of this report on Gaza's saying, look, now we've achieved a so-called truce. I know it's very fragile. They want a similar truce or ceasefire extended to the region.
نحمد الله على الوقف التام هذا بين ايران وبين اسرائيل، لانه هذه مجازر. احنا زي ما بنحبش المجازر اللي بيرتكبها العدو الاسرائيلي عندنا، برضه بنحبش المجازر نشوفها في اي دوله ثانيه، ان كان عربيه او فارسيه او اي دوله حتى امريكيه واي دوله في انحاء العالم. احنا بنحب العيش، بنحب الحريه، ما بنحب احنا العنف، ما بنحب القتل، بنحب السلام، وان شاء الله بنتشر السلام العام على كل الناس. بوقف الحرب إن كان بوقف الحرب في إيران وبوقف الحرب في إسرائيل، قادر إنه يوقف الحرب اللي لها الحين قربت على 3 سنوات داخل قطاع غزة، مذابح يوم، قتل أطفال، قتل شيوخ، القضاء على البنية التحتية، القضاء على التعليم، القضاء على الطب، القضاء على كل ما نملك في قطاع غزة.
نطالب قطر ونطالب الامريكان ونطالب الغرب خاصه بوقف اطلاق النار في غزه، ويدمجون في هذا الوقف اطلاق النار حتى تنتهي هذه الاجرام وهذه الماساه. والله هذه الماساه لن تمر على التاريخ البشري، من يوم ما قام التاريخ ما صار اللي صار، من مجازر، من بشع، ارتكبوا جميع الموبقات، ونطالبهم بالرحمه الينا، وكفى دمار وكفى هلاك.
So, Mohammed, as we saw this frustration from the people of Gaza, and I think that's a bit of an underestimation. That is a frustration. This is nearly a 2-year conflict, coming up to 2 years and 19 months now of a total massacre. Qatar has been very pivotal in trying to broker a peace between Israel and Hamas, trying to broker the kind of stalemate. We've seen attention shifting away from Palestine, which some analysts believe is the kind of root of all the issues in Israel itself, in terms of them lashing out the way they are and really attacking sovereign nations like Lebanon, attacking the sovereignty of Syria itself, the Houthis in Yemen. do you think that Qatar has the kind of the resources in terms of the compunction to come back and say, you know what, we need to bring everyone back to the negotiating table in regards to Iran as well as Gaza itself?
Yeah, I do agree. And that was a lovely question. I mean, definitely, yes, when everybody's talking about a ceasefire between Iran and Israel, so there are calls for what happened to the ceasefire in the Gaza, in Palestine, because those people deserve more, I mean, ceasefire than anybody else in this world, I guess. So it's a continuous process. People are suffering. The kids are being, I mean, yesterday I saw some of the videos, you know, when the food, they went out to collect the food and they were killed. I mean, some of the children were killed, and it's a regular daily routine when the Israeli forces are attacking the civilians in Gaza. So I feel yes, the ceasefire is very much important right now, not only just for Iran and in Israel, but for priority. If they want to do a priority basis, they should do it for the Palestine people, for the Gaza people. And talking about Qatar, yeah, you are absolutely right. Qatar do have resources. Qatar do, I know, wield that enough power, the resources. If you talk about the money, if you talk about, you know, the kind of that, you know, the connectivity they have with the world leaders, and especially in the Arab region, and especially in West Asia, they can do it. They did it. They did it with in the previous occasions. Also, they have a lot of leaders coming here. They have bases here in Doha. They had meetings. They mediated, and I feel under the regime of Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the ruler of Qatar. Qatar do play a very big role. Even it's very interesting to see a tiny country and it is immense, wielding immense power, and that should have come from countries like Saudi Arabia. That could have come from Kuwait. Kuwait is very silent, and Oman, Bahrain. Oman, obviously, they have really negotiated well, and they have played a very lead role in this Iran-Israel tussle. But Qatar's lead has been immense over the years, last 15 years. If you see any kind of bringing in the confrontations going on, and they're bringing in the leaders on the table, it's only Qatar who can do this.
I want to go on a bit of a tangent now and talk about Al Jazeera, which is a well-known brand all across the world. It's been argued that the genocide in Gaza is the first broadcast live-streamed genocide in the world. We didn't see that in Iraq, but we've now seen it in Al Jazeera, and a lot of people across the world have been tuning into Al Jazeera Arabic as well as English. Now, Al Jazeera has been fully criticized by the Israeli state and the extremist elements within it for broadcasting the genocide in effect. Journalists are being banned from actually going in. Western journalists have been banned. We've seen over 250 journalists killed in Gaza itself. We've seen over 2,000 healthcare workers being killed in Gaza. Do you think that Al Jazeera's role in broadcasting this genocide is something that's part of the statecraft of Qatar?
Yeah, I do agree. Definitely, someone has to show the real picture of what the forces, the external forces, are doing. Carrying out those killings in Palestine, and the people, not only the civilians, as you mentioned, that a lot of journalists were killed, a lot of human rights workers were killed, a lot of medical teams were wiped out, even the hospitals, bombing on the walls. So I feel that Qatar do play a role in bringing all these pictures, the genocide that you're talking about, to the world view, because none of the media has ever shown this kind of stories. Al Jazeera is a platform where I believe that they have been very, very neutral in talking about the pure journalism, the pure media reports that one believes in, one trusts, or one would like to watch. I mean, if I have a common TV watcher, I would like to see the real story, not just that balancing. It should be a balancing act, which Al Jazeera is doing, and now they have banned Al Jazeera not getting into the country.
But then, does this make Al Jazeera a legitimate target? I mean, we all benefit from the very exceptional resources that the Qatar has put towards Al Jazeera itself. Does that make it a very legitimate target for the Israelis and other Western countries in terms of trying to kind of stop Al Jazeera, even finish it off in some kind of in its form it is working right now? As you mentioned, Qatar is a small country. It's not the size of Saudi Arabia and other countries neighboring it, but it wields a lot of goodwill within the world community as well as good soft power. And that, for me, I would like to gauge your opinion on it. Does it make Al Jazeera a legitimate target for those who are hostile nations?
Yeah, that's always the Al Jazeera journalists, the Al Jazeera media, they're always under the scanner. Whenever Al Jazeera comes to the forefront, I mean, those powers, they believe that Al Jazeera is going to, highlight the reality of the reality of the things that are happening around in the world, including, Gaza, including Palestine, anywhere. Al Jazeera talks sense, and there are people who loves to listen, loves to watch something which is sensible, not which is fabricated. So Al Jazeera's way of reporting, being very honest and not being fabricating any facts. I mean, if you have cross-checked, Al Jazeera comes out with latest facts. So I believe, yes, people, they don't like to listen to the truth. People don't like to be honest on their faces. So as a matter of fact, it's definitely it's always under the scanner. People can target Al Jazeera.
Now, you mentioned something important, fabricating the truth. Western media outlets across the world, and we've seen reports, allegations being put across to the BBC as well as the CNN, in terms of their kind of reporting style on the war in Gaza. Now, media plays an important role, especially social media. We've seen statecraft in terms of TRT, BBC in terms of, though it says it's not connected to the government itself, but it's funded by license fee payers. Do you believe that organizations that were very well respected, like the BBC and CNN, very briefly, have lost the trust of the audience? Very briefly, because we're going to go to a break.
Because if you check the facts, I mean, if it is like, BBC, CNN, or other major players in the media world, just check the facts, you'll come to know nothing comes in, they are pro ... They are not pro those parties who wants their voices to be heard. So that's what makes Al Jazeera something very unique. At least they are voicing the truth of the people who are suffering. And I don't get to see any of the things from BBC or CNN talking in favor of the people in Gaza.
On that note, Mohammed Amin, all the way from Doha, Qatar, thank you so much. Please do join me after the break, where we'll continue our rolling coverage on the war between Israel and Iran. The truce, if it's holding up or not, we will see in the next couple of hours. Do join me after this break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Islam Channel's rolling coverage on the war between Israel and Iran. I'm your host, Afan Ali. We had earlier on Mohammed Amin, all the way from Qatar, a journalist. Mohammed, I want to bring you back into the conversation in regards to the media. We've said that in terms of the Western media, it seems from analysts that a lot of the Western media has lost the kind of moral compass in terms of reporting this war. We've seen the same issue, just kind of making comparisons between the BBC. You see the BBC categorically state that it's, can't report from Tehran because its journalists have been banned. Again, we do see some reports when they do say, okay, we cannot report from Gaza because we've been banned as journalists. What do you think the reason behind Netanyahu and his, elements of his right-wing extremist government have in terms of banning Western journalists? What do they not want to show the public?
Because they're scared. I mean, they're scared to tell the world about the truth that is being that is happening around Israel or in Palestine. But I guess in Israel too, I mean, there are a lot of people they're unhappy with the regime. I mean, if they're calling for a regime change in Iran, I think Israel too has this problem, and there are different, the Jewish sects, and that is not highlighted. That is not highlighted. I mean, a long time back, I watched a video, and this was something like the Jewish people. They said that the government doesn't want to know about the story. There is a discrimination among the Jewish people, the black Jews who comes from Ethiopia. There are Jews who have come from, Poland, they come from Russia. I think those Jews, they treat the black Jews. So these stories has nobody told about, no BBC, no CNN. So I think Netanyahu, that's what his target is, that to control the media, not to tell the world about what is their problem. The Muslim world problem everybody has come to know, just because they are highlighting it. That's what I'm saying. The balancing act in journalism is not there. If you just see any of the reports, they're only talking about the Israelis, how they are affected by the Iran's explosions, the Iran attack. But have anybody done any critical writing or critical analysis on the people who are suffering in Iran? Why they have bombed? Why Israel have targeted Israel? Why Israel is doing in Gaza? Nobody has talked about it. So that's the reason. That's the worry. There's a factor of worry that you will be exposed. You will be exposed to the world where you are, kind of a superhero, a super figure. When it crumbles, then the problem happens. Then you are scared. Then you control the media.
Oh, yeah, on this note of kind of repressive regimes or repressive kind of media reporting here in the UK, we had this kind of Palestine Action Group which took affirmative action and attacked a plane with red paint. Now, the issue here, this organization has now been proscribed, meaning they're on kin to being the same as Hamas. So Britain announced plans to ban the activist group Palestine Action under anti-terrorism laws after its members damaged UK military aircraft in protest of support for Israel. The move criminalizes group membership or promotion, sparking outrage and street protests as critics warn of a crackdown on political dissent and civil liberties. Have a watch of this.
Britain said on Monday, June 23rd, it would use anti-terrorism laws to ban the campaign organisation Palestine Action, making it a criminal offence to belong to the group after its activists damaged 2 UK military planes in protest at London's support for Israel. The prescription would put the pro-Palestinian group on a par with Hamas, Al-Qaeda or ISIS under British law, making it illegal for anyone to promote it or be a member. Those who breached the ban could face up to 14 years in jail. Palestine Action took to the streets of London to protest the ban.
Friday at 6 a.m., Palestine Action exposed not only a security liability at one of the Air Force bases, but indeed the RAF's continued role in this genocide on Palestine. Within 12 hours, the government decided to take the unprecedented step of banning a domestic protest movement. It's been a shocking whirlwind weekend for us. Palestine Action is collection of direct action protesters. We are not terrorists. We are teachers. We are fathers. We are nurses and students. We are a group of British people who just want this genocide to stop, and we are willing to do whatever it takes to stop it. Yeah, you know, I just took the Life in the UK test, and there was a question on it about how this country values free speech, and yet my domestic protest movement is about to be banned under terrorism laws, and we weren't even allowed to protest in front of Parliament today because the Metropolitan Police preempted that decision by the government and did not even let us congregate in front of Parliament. The hypocrisy of Keir Starmer has been on display for many months now. It is not surprising that he, as a barrister, once defended people he's now calling a terrorist. But what do you expect from a man who's made more U-turns than he has policies?
Palestine Action has regularly targeted British sites connected to Israeli defence firm Elbit Systems, as well as other companies in Britain linked to Israel since the start of the conflict in Gaza in 2023. In its latest and most high-profile action, 2 of its members entered a Royal Air Force base in central England on Friday, spraying paint into the engines of the Voyager transport aircraft and further damaging them with crowbars. Palestine Action, which says Britain is an active participant in the conflict in Gaza because of military support it provides to Israel, called the ban an unhinged reaction, which it would challenge, and accused Cooper of making a series of categorically false claims. Earlier on Monday, the group was forced to change the location of a planned protest after police banned it from staging a demonstration outside Parliament, otherwise a popular location for protests in support of a range of causes.
Mohammed, your response on this?
Yeah, I think so. It's a nice, I won't say a story, it's a reality where I saw he's claiming that he's not a terrorist, but a doctor, a teacher, yes, things are changing. Things are changing for better. And, I mean, the spectators, the players, and the athletes, they are voicing their protest against the genocide in Palestine, in Gaza. So I think the eyes have opened. People have started listening to the truth, and it's the humanity. What I feel is the humanity. People have suddenly started believing, what if those things happens to us? Let us feel in that way. Like what happened in Doha yesterday, people were trembling, people were screaming, and the families, they were really scared. But for a chance, I thought about what happens to a child in Gaza. They are waking up with the siren calls, they're sleeping with the siren calls, they're listening to the loud noise, explosions of the bombs, of what the Israeli forces are throwing on them. So now the world has awakened. The people are not at all, turning their eyes to those incidents. Yes, Al Jazeera, that I'm reading to this topic of Al Jazeera's, marvelously done coverage of the genocide, marvelous coverage on Palestine problems, the Israeli attacks. So people have realized now this is the time that we should, at least voice our protest. It's a peaceful protest, yes, and that's going to change the things in the coming years, inshallah.
So absolutely, we've seen 28 marches in national Palestine demonstrations across London. We've seen hundreds of marches up and down the country, United Kingdom. We've seen marches all over the world in support and in solidarity of the Palestinian cause. Really, the Israelis have exposed themselves as being a very kind of genocidal regime in that sense. That's not my words, that's the words of the UN in terms of not allowing food aid to come in, people starving to death, over 67,000 individuals killed, thousands under the rubble, and mass starvation continue to happen in Gaza itself. Do you believe that Israel has lost the narrative, the narrative across the world, and become a kind of international pariah state?
Yeah, I agree with you. They have lost the narrative, and I think the soil under their feet have loosened, and that's the reason they don't know. What they are up to. After attacking Iran and then coming back to the calling it peace truce, and which is not even a peace deal. Actually, they are breaking it. They are going into it. So they have lost that, the path. They have lost the calculations. Not, I mean, no wonder then, I mean, Donald Trump got so annoyed, vexing with the Israeli authorities. So their narrative, it was all over there since so many years. Now with the social media, now with people are more inclined. I mean, I think the youngsters today, the children who are going to the school, they are to have that kind of knowledge about what's going on in Gaza. In Qatar, I know for sure that the people, not the people, but the young children in schools, they were aware of the genocide people are killing. So in one particular schools, the children refuse to buy any of the products of the Israeli products. So they have refused to take that, refused to buy, even telling their parents not to go for those stuff which are being manufactured or produced by the companies that have a link to them. So this is an awakening.
We've seen like state broadcasters controlling the media narrative. We've seen kind of journalists not being allowed to go into Tehran, as well as not being allowed to go into the Gaza as well. Now, in terms of the narrative in Israel itself, I mean, Israelis have same access to social media as others have across the world. Why can they not see what everyone else is calling out to be a genocide? Do you think that they choose to ignore it, believe it, or have they been hoodwinked by their own government in terms of to ignore the situation?
I guess definitely yes, they were hoodwinked by their own government, and as in to be very precise, they don't have a pinpoint policy on what to work on. And the social media, as you mentioned, the social media, the vast of social media. Now let's talk. I mean, Gaza problem is a universal problem. It's an world politics. Everybody talks about Gaza, but nobody has ever talked how to protect these children. I mean, there's a social media working everywhere in Israel. The social media are more on showing their kind of problems rather than they're talking about. I mean, obviously, the government also wants them to show what government wants to do. I mean, it's a government policy, so they don't want to talk about the good things. They don't want to go for the humanitarian actions. They want to only save their skin. I think that's the reason. I think they have lost that narrative, as you said, rightly said, and I believe they're haywire, going here and there. I mean, there is no pinpoint action that they should take.
Yeah, so I've also seen between when the original attacks were happening in terms of Gaza on October the 7th, around 19 months ago, there was a mass exodus of Israelis going back who have dual nationalities, going back to the countries of origin. We see something similar happening as well. A lot of Israelis finding the whole situation in the region, the government has taken them to another war with the Iranians. It must be kind of very destabilizing for those people who have set up homes and roots in Israel itself.
Yeah, a lot of Israelis, they are leaving Israel. Those who came with a little hope that it is our, as so-called, the promised land. The promises are not there. I mean, so see, any day a family rather, they would love to have their things going on, the children going to school. They don't want fights. I don't think that any human being would advocate war or would be going for the violence. And the children, for the matter, I mean, they would love to be in an environment, and that was the promise.
But you see that I think you've kind of pinpointed a very important point here. You've said that no human wants violence. Do you believe that Netanyahu and elements of his extremist government himself, who again is very deeply unpopular, is due for corruption charges for himself and his wife, according to filings in Israeli courts, as well as being wanted a war criminal by the ICC to come in front of The Hague to stand trial for war crimes. Do you believe that the Israeli people are fully convinced by Netanyahu and what he stands for?
I mean, definitely there are people, as I said, like the residents, the Israelis, the Jews people. I mean, some of them definitely are peace-loving people. I mean, what we see is the government narrative. We haven't heard of the people's narrative. As you rightly pointed out, a lot of Israelis, a lot of Jews, they are leaving their country. They are vacating their country. Nobody wants that. Nobody would love to stay in an environment where every day there is bombing, there is violence, killings. It's really creates some kind of negativity around you. And rightly said, recently there were photographs of people trying to get into the bunker when Iran threw the missile. And there were one picture I saw that, that some of the Jewish people, they said no to non-Jewish people, that we have the rights to get into. So as I said, maybe the section of Jewish people, they could be good, and the section of the people who are basically the rightists, they want their promised land, and people would love to, in modern world, everybody talks about Netanyahu, or everybody talks about Israel's, the agenda. So there are people who supports him, but there are people who doesn't support him. But that we don't know that story. That's what their government don't want the world to know about their story. We don't know. The BBC never covers such kind of stories, or CNN never covered any kind of video footages. Have you ever seen that the Jewish people leaving Israel to any other country?
Yeah, well, I have seen footage come from Reuters where there has been some exodus from Israel itself in the early, when the attacks originally happened on October the 7th, over 19 months ago. Mohammed, while you're still with me, I want you to have a watch of this. Iranians in Tehran expressed relief over the ceasefire between Iran and Israel, but many said that they found it not comforting. It should have come sooner to spare civilians on both sides. And then amid ongoing tensions and conflicting reports of ceasefire violations, residents voiced hope for lasting peace while expressing deep fatigue from days of fear.
باید این زودتر از اینا هم انجام میشه، چون هزینه‌شو دارن مردم میدن. فرقی میکنه چه مردم ما چه مردم اونا. هزینه‌شو دارن دو طرف میدن. بهتره که زودتر این اتفاق بیفته. دیگه باید چیزایی که لازمه بابت این آتش بس رو ازشون بگیرن دیگه. یه سری الزامات اونا هم باید رعایت بکنن که این اتفاق بیفته.
من موافقم. دلیلش هم به خاطر اینکه 12 شب نخوابیدم. بعد دیگه بعد 12 روز امروز در اومدم بیرون، دیدم آتش بس، گفتم پیاده روی و اینا. بعد اینکه آرامش باشه، چرا مخالف باشه؟
امیدوارم که پایبند بمونه با آتش بس. سابقه نشون داده که هیچ موقع پایبند نبوده، ولی امیدوارم که پایبند بمونه، چون هم به نفع ماست هم به نفع اوناست.
That was some reactions from residents in Tehran. Mohammed, I want to bring you back into the discussion here. We had residents in Tehran expressing their concerns. Now we're going to head to Jerusalem, where residents expressed cautious hope on Tuesday amid, the ongoing, ceasefire, which has been mooted by Donald Trump, effective. It seems that locals said that they longed for peace and normalcy after 12 days of conflict, though some have remained shaken by deadly missile strikes just hours before the truce began.
We just heard about the ceasefire that President Trump said. Well, let's hope it will come true. Let's wait till 7 o'clock this morning, I guess, no? But the last launch from Iran, 3 Israeli people killed in the city of Beersheba. So bad, very sad. But let's hope from today on we'll live in peace, peacefully, yeah.
Hopefully, we can all get back to work and get back to what we were doing. But the most important thing is that this will hopefully make Israel safe for my children and their children to live here for a long time. And that's what we wanted.
אני מקווה מאוד שבאמת יגיע שקט. אני חושב שהמתקפה האחרונה היא ודאי קשה ויש 3 הרוגים וזה קשה, אבל אני מקווה מאוד שנגמרה המלחמה באמת ונוכל לחזור לימים של שקט.
Mohammed, it seems from the reports that we just saw in Tehran, as well as reports that we've just seen in Tel Aviv, that people want peace. The ordinary person wants peace, and they're wedged between ongoing historical situation since the Nakba. We have people in Gaza, Palestine, holding on to the keys of their homes and saying that we have a right of return. Now, when you have the Zionist Israeli regime and its people coming into a land and taking over their land, and juxtaposed to that, you have the Gazans who are not willing to give up their land for any reason and have been ongoing fighting this Nakba for the last 77 years. Where do you think the solution will come from?
And that's a very, I would say, a very difficult question.
And if you can answer that question, then maybe you should be the UN Secretary General, I guess, and you can make it sustainable.
Yeah, I would carry a bouquet of flowers to both these parties and settle down. I mean, don't behave like kids, because this is a world that we have to save, and it's the human life, and we are answerable. If you're believing that you're a religious person, you're believing in both the faiths that we're going. At the end of the day, I mean, we would say that it's an Abrahamic faith. We all are together, and somebody has to talk about this. Somebody has to chip in and talk from that religious point of view. What's the fight? What's this kind of tussle is all about for the last 70 years that you have been fighting, guys.
But Mohammed, that's the point. I think even a child in the United Kingdom, a child in Qatar knows what the fight is. The fight is effectively Gazans or people from the West Bank or Jenin or Palestinians want their homeland back, and they say they have a right to return, whereas the Israelis believe that this is something that God ordained to them and they have a right to a Jewish homeland. And for them, right-wing extremists amongst them, the Zionists, would say, well, there's 2.2 billion Muslims around the world, 1/4 of the global population of 8.1 billion people. You can live other places, but this is the Jewish homeland. You can see there's some merit and argument in what they're saying. You can see merit and argument in what the Palestinians are saying, and they have a right to resist.
Yeah, this is like, again, a thing that one has to accept, whose promised land, whose land. And I would say that, two-nation theory that has been coming up the last 2 years from the United Nations, and it has been, we haven't heard of this two-nation theory. Why not create a two-nation, make them happy, make the Jews the state, or make the other state for the Muslims?
But so Mohammed, I want to challenge you on that point. The two-state solution, the problem with that is you had, and again, David Cameron, who was a former Prime Minister in the United Kingdom, described Gaza as an open-air prison camp. You have one side, which is the Israeli side, which has the money, the power, the resources, not sharing the resources, not sharing the economic benefits of living in a two-state solution. And, they've kind of really torpedoed the two-state solution, where other global leaders believe that the two-state solution is the solution. So really, you have one party that's victimizing the other party. How would you encourage trust to be established when this has been the ongoing scenario for the decades upon decades?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's also a valid fact. You know, you are residing side by side. One has the power, money, and other don't have. They're struggling. The Muslims are struggling. The Muslim population in Palestine, they are struggling. They don't have land. They are fighting for the land. It is their land, and they are fighting for it. Definitely, someone has to come in. Yeah, I mean, talking about the Muslim world. We have seen the OIC, and we have seen a lot of Muslim organizations, Islamic organizations. They're coming in, they're talking, and in the United Nations Security Council, we have been hearing.
Mohammed Amin, thank you. On that note, on the two-state solution, Mohammed Amin, analyst and journalist, all the way from Doha, Qatar. Thank you for your time, and please carry on joining us after the break, where we'll have a North Korea expert explaining the nuclear situation in North Korea. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islam Channel's rolling coverage on the war in Israel and Iran. Though a ceasefire has been declared by Donald Trump, it seems that Iran and Israel is not fully aware of the ceasefire and has continued to fire barrages of missiles at each other due to ongoing tensions. It has obviously has totally aggravated Donald Trump, where he, in a sweary rant, he has asked both to restrain and to respect the ceasefire. This continues to cause difficult decisions to be made in the region, in the Middle East. Joining me now is Dr. Owen Miller, a lecturer in Korean Studies. Welcome to the program, Dr. Miller.
Thank you. Good to be here.
One of your expertise is on North Korea, which has nuclear weapons, which it developed in secrecy under the noses of the Western powers. For our audience, I want you to just unpack what South Korea, North Korea, and just that period after the World War. We know that there's over 25,000 US service personnel stationed in South Korea, and the country has been divided up into South and North Korea after World War II. So for our audience, if you can give us a brief history of the region.
Yeah, okay, right. But I'll try and be very brief. Kind of history lesson. It's not easy for academics to be very brief, but I'll try. Yeah, so after the end of before the end of the Second World War, Korea was actually a colony of Japan. It had been a colony for 35 years. And Koreans expected, to be liberated when Japan was defeated in August 1945. And to an extent, they were liberated, but actually, because the Soviet Union and the US both defeated Japan together, they then decided to partition the country into two halves, not permanently, but just while they occupied. The Soviet Union occupied the north, and the Americans occupied the south. It was supposed to be just temporary, but in the next few years, obviously the Cold War began around about 1946-47, and then from that point onwards, really the partition became permanent. Then, of course, 1950, the partition leads to the outbreak of the first hot war in the Cold War, really, which is the Korean War. Lasted for 3 years, led to the deaths of probably 3 to 4 million people, utterly devastating. But at the end of the Korean War, the dividing line between the two countries was more or less the same. So you still have now, getting on for 80 years later, you still have this demilitarized zone, which is the border between North and South, and the two countries are still kind of locked in that kind of very hostile, ongoing kind of low-level conflict with each other ever since 1953.
Now, North Korea has been cited by analysts as something that the regime or the supreme leader himself, the president of Iran, are looking towards. It has built up a nuclear arsenal under the noses of the West. And there is arguments amongst analysts and academics that because North Korea has the ability to launch these intercontinental ballistic missiles tipped with nuclear warheads, it's one of the reasons that it hasn't been attacked. That is maybe not as interesting for anyone else, but it is very interesting for the regime in Tehran to note this. Can you explain the nuclear program to our audience and why Tehran should be taking note?
Yeah, okay. I mean, just to go back on one thing that you mentioned, which is about the actual capabilities of North Korea. We know that they have nuclear bombs. And we know that they have, a certain number, and that they are effective because they've, done, I think now, a total of 6 nuclear tests. So they've proved to the world they have nuclear bombs and they work. Of course, the problem is actually, delivering those to the target and North Korea doesn't have anything like the kind of technology that Russia or the US or China has in terms of ICBMs, in terms of submarine launch missiles, in terms of long-range bombers. You saw what the Americans used when they just attacked Iran at the weekend. They used these B-2 Spirit bombers, which can go huge long distances undetected. North Korea has none of that stuff. So, it's what I'm saying here is it does have nuclear weapons, but we have to kind of get them in perspective, what their capabilities are. It's unknown really whether they have the capability entirely to launch and successfully target an ICBM at the US or another country. So just saying that.
But could they? Thank you for that clarification in regards to the intercontinental capabilities of North Korea. However, I suppose that the target wouldn't probably be America or any other country if they don't have the ability to deliver that nuclear payload. However, it can potentially strike its counterpart, which is South Korea.
Yeah, and it has been said that they may be developing like tactical nuclear weapons, which are ones you use over much shorter distances. So yes, possibly, but there are a number of problems with that. I mean, one problem is that the Korean Peninsula is quite a small place, right? So, I mean, the potential is if you use nuclear weapons against your rival on the same peninsula, it's going to have effect on you as well, right? So that's one problem. Another problem, of course, is that, North and South Korea are, historically were the same country for a very long time. They speak the same language, they have the same culture, and ultimately people in both countries would like ultimately to be reunified. So nuking the other side is not really a very good, So there are limitations. Yes, I guess probably the most strategic thing that the North Koreans could do may be to threaten other nearby countries like Japan, who are allies of the US. But yeah, they have some capabilities. I mean, also, I think another thing that constrains the US in terms of potentially attacking North Korea, they've had plans to attack North Korea, and they've never carried them out. But they are constrained also by the fact that South Korea is there, and that even without nuclear weapons, North Korea could launch an absolutely devastating attack on South Korea with just conventional artillery, bombing, and so on. So, not only is South Korea an American ally, it's also an important part of the world economic system, right? It's like the 11th biggest economy in the world. It's an important part of many supply chains and so on. So, whereas perhaps, I guess that the US is not quite so worried about the capabilities of Iran in terms of disrupting the Middle East as it is in terms of North Korea's capability of disrupting Northeast Asia, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I can see that. We saw in Donald Trump's first premiership, if you can call it that, presidency, he made overtures to the regime there. What was he hoping to achieve in that first encounter with North Korea?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It can be quite difficult to discern Trump's motives, as we all know. I mean, I think that what was motivating him mainly in his first term was that he wanted to have a big foreign policy win. He wanted to be seen as the deal maker, the guy who could come along and solve some sort of long-standing international problem like the problem with North Korea and so on, and that he could be the man who could do it. And he had a go, but I mean, for various reasons, they messed it up, basically. And, I think again and again, you see this with Trump, that he thinks that he can solve things. He thinks that as this sort of, whatever he imagines himself to be, amazing businessman, real estate mogul or whatever, he has this skill that other politicians don't have to be able to solve international problems. But time and again, he says that, and then it doesn't happen, right? I mean, look at Ukraine. He's claimed that he's going to come along and bring peace and do a deal between Ukraine and Russia, and nothing has actually happened yet. So I think the similar situation with North Korea in his first term, really, yeah.
We've seen Donald Trump kind of send confusing messages, as he normally does in the office, and for him, he believes that as part of his genius is that he kind of doesn't let anyone know what he's actually thinking, but he knows what he's thinking, and he's just waiting for the right time. And that was more evident in terms of the strikes against Iran. Now, some hawks within his administrations, maybe eyeing up North Korea in that fact. We've seen the fact that North Korea is under the sphere of influence of the Russians. North Korea has sent over 10,000 troops to Ukraine to fight with the Russians, kind of solidarity with the Russians there. We've seen North Korea also being under the sphere of influence of China, and we have Taiwan as well, which America has vowed to defend. Do you think that Donald Trump potentially and the hawks within his administration are sending clear messages to China, Russia, and even North Korea itself?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I mean, yeah, I think there have always been hawks in the US administration. Actually, in both Democrat and Republican administrations who want to go harder on North Korea, perhaps even launch attacks on its nuclear sites. And as I said, they've had plans for these things in the past. But I think the situation there is just more constrained for the Americans. I can imagine that they might be making kind of noises in order to frighten the North Koreans a bit, in order to strengthen kind of negotiating situation more than, negotiating position of the US rather than anything else. That might be happening, but I would be very surprised if they got to a situation of taking action.
Well, look, the threat of action is important. I mean, we saw that President Trump, under his first administration, make muted efforts to engage with the regime in North Korea. Overall, what lessons can Tehran take from from North Korea itself, if any?
I think, unfortunately, to be honest with you, the most obvious lesson is that you need to get on and develop nuclear weapons. I mean, that's the very sad lesson of this. I mean, if you look back at the sort of history of all of this, there are kind of interesting similarities between North Korea and Iran, right? So, in both cases, they've been developing some kind of nuclear capacities. Both countries have long-standing civilian nuclear programs, right? North Korea has one that the Soviet Union helped it with, and I believe Iran has a nuclear program that the Americans helped them with, right, when it was under the Shah, right? So the origins of Iran's nuclear program actually come via the Americans. I believe that's correct. So maybe it needs fact-checking. But so, they both have these long-standing civilian nuclear programs, which then at a certain point, in the case of the North Koreans, they decided at the end of the Cold War in about 1990, 1991, when they were losing the backing, the support of the Soviet Union that they'd relied on for decades, they basically decided we need a kind of nuclear insurance policy. So they started on the process in the early 90s of developing nuclear weapons, just beginning. But the interesting thing here is that in 1994, they negotiated a pretty good settlement with the Americans called the Agreed Framework, which basically froze the North Korean nuclear program for quite a few years until the early 2000s. And, that's quite parallel with what happened with Iran, right? It wasn't at the end of the Obama administration, as far as I remember, they negotiated this deal with Iran. And from what I've seen of the evidence that's come out about that, it also froze the Iranian nuclear program. No more fuel was being reprocessed after that until Trump decided to break that agreement in his first term. Right. So the interesting thing here is in both cases, you had what looked like successful agreements to freeze the process of nuclear development. And then in both cases, it's broken down. I mean, certainly in the Iranian case, it's clearly because the Americans, Trump didn't want to carry on with it. No. North Korean case, a bit more complicated. Both sides kind of broke the agreement. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, you've said an interesting phrase, which I'm going to pick up on. You said nuclear insurance. North Korea deployed its nuclear insurance option and developed its nuclear program. Now, what do you believe from your expertise and analysis on North Korea and other nation states that other countries won't be looking at the whole situation in Tehran, especially in the Middle East, and saying, oh, well, hang on 1 minute, we need nuclear insurance like the regime in North Korea. We seen Erdogan last week come out and said that Turkey would be a country that would militarize, that it would actually develop its own munitions into the country and become more self-reliant on its own for its military-industrial complex. We've seen the NATO leadership meeting today, in fact, and saying that they need to spend more than 2.5%, up to 5% of GDP, even though Spain has reluctantly said that it doesn't want to spend that amount of money. So you got the NATO alliance saying that all members should be spending around 5% of GDP. You see in America, which spends billions, if not trillions, on its industrial complex. Do you believe that this whole situation in starting from Gaza to what's happened in Syria, what's happened in Lebanon, Libya, Iraq, has now kicked off an arms race? And I'm going to call Sir Keir Starmer here, the Labour leader, which he said within 3 years we've got to be ready for war.
Yeah, I think there's been a kind of remilitarization going on for quite a while now, and various different things have fed into it. I mean, I think the Iraq War, I mean, the fact that George Bush decided to, persecute a completely illegal and really unjustifiable war against Iraq, which did not have WMD or nuclear weapons or chemical weapons. That and then the chaos that ensued from that. I mean, I think that kind of set in train a lot of these events, but it's been really accelerated now with Trump, because Trump quite clearly, Trump and the people around him like Vance and so on, they're not really interested in that kind of liberal world order of, the post-Second World War period and the post-1991, post-Cold War period. They're not interested in that, really. They seem to have a kind of might is right attitude. They seem to have the attitude that countries all have to look after themselves, and everyone's going to be listening to that. And okay, European countries are listening. They've got to spend 5% of GDP, but not just European countries. Other countries are going to be listening. There's a big debate going on right now in South Korea about nuclear weapons. I mean, it's not getting into the news that much, but 10 years ago, the idea that South Korea could get nuclear weapons was kind of a fringe idea, right? Now it's becoming a mainstream idea in South Korea. We need nuclear weapons. We can't trust the Americans to defend us. We need it against all kinds of potential threats. So that's just one country. There will be other countries as well. And Iran is a country, obviously, that's at the sharp end of it. I mean, it's already neighboring a nuclear power, right? Because Pakistan has nuclear weapons. Israel, as we know, has nuclear weapons. So, I mean, in some ways, a lot of this comes back to the non-proliferation treaty, in which the 5 original nuclear powers tried to prevent other countries getting nuclear weapons. But I think we can say, although that NPT still exists on paper, it's hard to say that it's really got much meaning anymore, because multiple other countries now have nuclear weapons: India, Pakistan, North Korea, Israel. And on top of that, multiple other countries are looking at getting nuclear weapons at some point. So, I think in these circumstances, Iran is, well, to me, I think that what Israel has done and what the US have done here is likely to have exactly the opposite effect of what they wanted. It's likely to accelerate their desire to get nuclear weapons, unless the Americans come along and put something on the table that they can negotiate with Tehran with, but I can't see that at the moment.
We had Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu say to the people of Iran, the 90 million people of Iran, that he encouraged them to be free from the regime. He said that our countries go back a long way and have a very close ties with the Persian Empire. Now, Netanyahu has encouraged regime change in Iran since the Ayatollah Khomeini came in 1979, deposing the Shah of Iran, which was installed by Western powers after the democratic election of the regime before that. In terms of coming back to North Korea itself, we see that North Korea and the people of North Korea is another. If you could explain to our viewers around the regime itself, the people, and affecting regime change. Is a country like North Korea able to affect regime change, and is there any parallels that we can draw from that and the situation in Iran?
Yeah, I mean, just one thing to say in the first place. I mean, you know, leaders coming on like Netanyahu and just saying, you know, calling for regime change. I mean, it is actually kind of illegal for another country to pursue regime change in another country. I mean, it's anyway. We seem to be beyond the kind.
But the Americans have been pursuing regime change for decades upon decades.
Well,
I haven't seen anyone chase the American regime.
No, you are right. You are right on that front. I mean, the Americans obviously have had the CIA running around in all kinds of places, carrying out coups and all kinds of things. So yeah, it's not unusual. But I mean, it just seems to be becoming like almost normal that people don't even comment on this. It's just like, oh well. Yeah, I mean, in the case of North Korea, regime change is pretty unlikely. It is a very, very well-established authoritarian regime, you know, which has a lot of experience in how to control its people, and also to give some sort of idea. It also has a degree of legitimacy, right? I mean, in the sense that this is a regime that has kind of staked itself on defending its people against outside powers, on defending its people against the Americans particularly. And of course, it goes right back to the Korean War. I mean, obviously, a generation of people who were alive at the time of the Korean War are still alive, many of them. And they remember the devastation that the country suffered in the Korean War at the hands of American aerial bombardment. So the regime, you know, can still draw on a degree of legitimacy. But yeah, I mean, having said that, it is a really authoritarian regime, and you know, you can see that many people, if they get a chance, do try to leave the country as refugees and go to China and then on to third countries like South Korea as well.
While I've got a North Korean expert in front of me, I thought it might be a very important, legitimate question to ask you. We saw in recent months in South Korea the unprecedented actions of the administration there to impose martial law on the country. Does that send mixed signals to North Korea and other democracies around the world that a country that was considered a democracy could, in a matter of hours, flip to an autocracy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was a very shocking event. It was really, you know, I was watching it happening live back in December last year when they announced martial law, and it was like a shocking moment because it was sort of, you know, I mean, South Korea has basically been a democracy since the late 80s when there was a kind of people power revolution on the streets of Seoul, and it sort of seemed like suddenly the country was leaping back, you know, almost 40 years in the space of a few hours. The good thing, of course, and the very positive thing about it is that people stopped it happening, and it was overturned almost immediately, the coup. And then now since then, obviously, there's been a lot of contention in the country. There's been big protests on both sides, and you know, and then in the end, of course, they've had an election at the beginning of this month on the 3rd of June, which brought in a more kind of centrist or progressive president. So, you know, that period of that coup attempt is over, but it did show something about maybe the fragility of democracies like South Korea, that they might seem quite stable on the surface, but, you know, there's various kinds of tensions simmering away in the political system, which can be pretty dangerous.
We have about a minute and a half, and I want to speak about North Korea in terms of proxies. Do you believe that Russia is using North Korea as a proxy, or China? Or is there any merit in that argument?
I would say no, not really. The relationship between North Korea and China, North Korea and Russia is a little bit different to that at the moment, because North Korea has been very successful over decades of like having these alliances, but keeping them at arm's length, right? It does not want, I mean, the last time that Russia or the Soviet Union interfered directly in North Korean politics was in the 1950s. So it's a long time ago. And since then, North Korea has really been very careful to try to keep keep those big powers, China and Russia, out of its internal affairs. Now, yes, I guess, Russia could possibly use North Korea in certain ways in like the international geopolitics, but I mean, I guess the main function of North Korea sending troops to Russia really was probably like about the kind of legitimacy of Russia's war in Ukraine, and sort of showing that Russia's not on its own; it's got support from another country.
Thank you, Dr. Owen Miller, lecturer in Korean Studies, for that insightful kind of analysis of the situation in North Korea and how it relates to Iran. So please do join me after the break, where we'll continue this rolling coverage.
I'm not happy. We've been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
ما حدث من مس سيادة لدولة قطر أمر غير مقبول، وسيتم اتخاذ كافة الإجراءات الدبلوماسية والقانونية لذلك، ونرجو أن يتم احتواء الموضوع في أسرع وقت ممكن. That will definitely have its scar on the relationship, what happened today, but I hope that by the time that everyone learns the lesson that this kind of neighborhood relationship should not be violated and should not be undermined.
Between first Iran as well as the United States. Thank you.
The partnership between Qatar and the US is just growing stronger, and I hope that this partnership also and good neighborhood relationship come back to its norm with Iran as soon as possible. كان هناك أيضا فرصة لإعلان لوقف إطلاق النار الكامل على كافة الجبهات، وطلبوا الأصدقاء في الولايات المتحدة أن تقوم دولة قطر بالتواصل مع الطرف الإيراني لمعرفة مدى استعدادهم لذلك، وقمنا بالاتصالات اللازمة والتي أسفرت عن الإعلان الذي أعلن عنه الرئيس الأمريكي، ونرحب بهذا الإعلام. نتمنى أن يستمر هذا الوقف وأن تعود المسألة لمسارها الدبلوماسي، ونحث الأطراف للالتزام بما تم الاتفاق عليه. كما أيضا نحث الجانب الأمريكي والجانب الإيراني للعودة فورا إلى طاولة المفاوضات بخصوص المحادثات النووية واستئناف هذه المحادثات للوصول إلى حل دبلوماسي الذي طالما دولة قطر سعت للوصول إليه. كان هناك اتصال بين سمو الأمير تم قبل قليل، استقبل اتصال من الرئيس الإيراني، والرئيس الإيراني عبر عن أسفه أن الهدف كان في دولة قطر، ووضحنا له بشكل واضح أن دولة قطر في النهاية هي دولة جارة، واعتمدت في علاقتها دائما على حسن الجوار مع إيران، ولم تتوقع مثل هذا العمل.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islam Channel's rolling coverage of the Israel-Iran war. A fragile ceasefire between the two belligerents is now officially in place, bringing a tentative halt to nearly 2 weeks of violent escalation that saw missile exchanges, retaliatory airstrikes, and mounting civilian and military casualties. But the situation remains volatile, and questions about the truce's durability are growing by the hour. US President Donald Trump announced what he called a complete and total ceasefire late on Monday, commending both nations for having what he described as the stamina, courage and intelligence to end what he termed the 12-day war. However, in a viral post on social media today, Trump expressed his frustration, blurting out, "Israel and Iran don't know what the F they're doing." He later issued a direct warning to Israel, saying, "Do not drop those bombs," after reports emerged of renewed Israeli air operations targeting Iranian infrastructure. Iran, for its part, has denied launching any missiles following the ceasefire's declaration. Still, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said Tehran had already violated the agreement and authorized what he called intense and targeted strikes in response. The Israeli military has since confirmed operations against strategic sites in Tehran, and meanwhile, diplomatic efforts continue. Iran has thanked Qatar for what it described as a constructive role in reducing tensions, and the Qatari Prime Minister, however, reiterated his condemnation of Iran's earlier missile strike on the US base at Al Udeid, calling it a dangerous provocation. At the international level, the head of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, has urged Iran to resume full cooperation with global nuclear inspectors. The appeal comes amid rising concerns about the potential acceleration of Iran's nuclear activities following the recent conflict. In economic news, global oil prices tumbled today following confirmation of the ceasefire. Markets responded positively to what many investors hope will be a sustained de-escalation in the Middle East's most dangerous standoff in years. Despite diplomatic overtures and cautious optimism in some quarters, the road ahead remains uncertain, with tensions still simmering and trust between the parties virtually non-existent. The ceasefire's future is anything but guaranteed. So, now, joining us to discuss all of this is Syed Sharfuddin. He is a former Pakistani diplomat, and he joins us live from abroad. Syed Sharfuddin, what do you make of what's taken place? I mean, it's not conventional diplomacy, and perhaps this is the way things are going to be now. States will just tweet things and, like President Trump, even swear if they have to on camera.
We got used to the tweets and now what you call the posts on X in the first term of President Trump. But now in the second term of President Trump, we are now getting used to the way diplomacy would be working.
Yeah.
If you remember that after President Trump last week said, I give 2 weeks to both countries to work out their problems and hold their fire. The foreign ministers of Germany, France, and UK met with the Iranian foreign minister last Friday, and probably President Trump realized that the initiative had gone away from him because he would like to be in the center of things. And since we are talking in the way new diplomacy will work, he has seized the opportunity, taken the initiative away from the Europeans, also away from the Security Council, because when President Trump decided to send his bombers to Firdo and destroy the Iranian facility underground, he realized that at the UN Security Council, China, Russia, and Pakistan tabled a draft resolution which called for immediate ceasefire. So there were these initiatives being taken place, and President Trump surprisingly seized the initiative, as you said yesterday, by announcing, nobody expected him to announce that there should be ceasefire, and he wants everybody to listen to him, and that's why the frustration that you noticed today.
I'll just pause you now. Let's actually listen to what he had to say. We've got this clip.
I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because the one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
I was taken aback when news of that came on my social media feeds. It was, Sharfuddin, it was actually heartening to hear that Trump was angry at Israel, and probably more angry at Israel, because the Israelis appeared to be wild in the sense of their operations. Nobody can seem to tame them. They're always very difficult to get round a table. Their agreements are regularly violated by them. There's nobody that can say anything, and the only country that can say something is the United States, and it generally doesn't really say anything. But this was Trump in what appeared to be a very surprising rebuke of Israel.
There people who have been watching developments in the Middle East, including Islam Channel, you would realize that this is not the first time Prime Minister Netanyahu has violated a ceasefire agreement, although this was a very unusual ceasefire agreement in which the parties which are fighting against each other had nothing to do. It just came from the United States, Washington, D.C., that the war should stop. But however, having been agreed apparently for a few hours to this, the violation of the ceasefire by Israel was a deja vu factor for those people who remember how Israel violated the Hamas-Israel ceasefire last year.
Yeah.
And despite the fact that there was an agreement which had been coupled together with a very great deal of hard work by Qatar, and, Egypt, and the United States, it just went out of the window. So I think what appears from this is that Israel wants to have a ceasefire on its own terms, not on the terms of the United States, not on the terms of the parties who have negotiated at the table. However, he was stopped today. And this quote that has been repeated on social media and on TV channels many times will probably go down as the quotation of President Trump's second term. I see a number of reasons why President Trump has intervened, and so effectively and probably with a great deal of anger and frustration. The first is that, as I've already said, that he realized that the initiative was going away from the United States, that it was going to Europeans, it was going to China, Russia, and other countries in the Security Council who wanted a ceasefire, and U.S. was just becoming a sideline, marginal country, and which he didn't like, obviously. The second, again, you mentioned in your introduction that there has been an impact on oil prices. If the war had continued and Iran proved that it was not an open and shut war case, where you take down a country in a week and then you come back to normal, Iran had the capacity or has the capacity to continue, and this would have impacted on the oil prices. And in the United States, no administration can afford to have an increase in oil prices, because that is where the American people can go wild against their own administration. The third was there was this peace legacy. I genuinely feel that President Trump wants to go down in history as a peacemaker, as a president who did not encourage wars. And this was being tested. And he realized that if he does not do this now, the initiative will be gone, and he would not be able to make any contribution towards resolving the thing. Unfortunately, what he did today, which is most welcoming, he should have done also when Israel violated the ceasefire with Hamas and brought the two sides to the tables, initiated the talks on two-state solution, because the core factor which brings Israel against Iran is not really the nuclear facility, but what is behind the nuclear facility, and that is that Iran has always been a supporter and an active supporter of the Palestinian cause, and to that extent has also armed the proxies, which have created a lot of problems and pain for Israel. So he should have done that. He didn't do it, but he will do it in the future. But it is a very welcome development that he has put his foot down and he said, I, as the President of the United States, want these two countries to stop firing at each other.
Yes, and I think most analysts would agree that what Iran has proved is that it's no pushover. The Israelis, initially in their euphoria at the success of their bombing of Iranian nuclear sites or installations, actively were encouraging the Iranian people to rise up against the Iranian government. And much like Syria, I suppose, they thought, they are going to get a change in who leads Iran. But to the contrary, Iran actually united and came behind their government, who many people have a lot of problems with inside Iran, yet they were expressing their support in huge demonstrations. Would you say, Said Shafruddin, that Israel may have been aiming to weaken Iran and Iran's current government, but in fact what they've ended up doing is made it far stronger than they were before the attacks took place?
I think it's probably early to reach any conclusion either in Israel or in Iran, because
the reason I say that is when a country as isolated as Iran is, it has no support from any country in the Muslim world. It has covert support from Russia and China, but nothing open. And it had to endure a United States-backed operation of Israel, and even the United States in its bombing campaign, yet it was invited into a ceasefire, which will probably hold for a while now. I don't think hostilities will probably break out, or serious hostilities will break out for a number of years. That's victory for Iran, because it's still, or for the Iranian government, because it's still in power. That's the thrust of my claim that they've been successful.
No, I appreciate what you're saying, and I fully agree with you. But what happens is that, like in a fire or like in an emergency situation, the adrenaline starts flowing. Everybody gets to the bottom of the problem at hand. And when you have buried your dead, and when you come back to your destroyed houses, and then you start reflecting, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
And in that context, the Israelis will be saying that because there has been a lot of devastation and destruction, and for the first time, people in the state of Israel have really felt the pain of a real war, because Israel never went to a war with a sovereign independent country since 1973. And the same thing will happen in Iran. But it won't happen next week, it won't happen next month. But perhaps if the Iranian government is not able to revive the economic conditions, which, as you say, is very hard, there could be a resistance movement within Iran. However, what is completely understood by everybody, including Iran's enemies, is that a government which has been conceived in Washington or London or Paris and imposed upon the Iranian people will not be accepted by even the staunchest critic of the Ayatollahs. And I feel sorry for the son of the late Shah, who has been trying very hard to garner support, and he has been promoted on many social media platforms to reach out to the Iranian people, and it has not happened for us.
I don't think anybody takes him seriously. I mean, the Pakistan defense minister, when he tweeted that he was an imperial whore, that moniker has stuck, and I don't think anybody takes him seriously. But we've now got a NATO summit that's taking place, and the NATO chief, Mark Rutte, was very clear in that he thought there was no violation of international law in the attack by the United States on Iran, or Israel for that matter, but certainly by the United States, which means, which signals that the international law, which most international jurists assume operates, is not the international law which NATO and the United States believe operates. However, NATO itself is in a very big predicament, because the United States spends $967 billion per annum on NATO defense, and the closest countries that are sort of coming to that is Germany at 97 billion, and the UK at 82 billion, and France at 64 billion. Which is an absolute drop in the ocean when you consider the United States is providing 10 times the next largest contributor to NATO. Do you believe, Sayyid Sharafuddin, that NATO in its current guise can actually survive as a protective force for Europe and the European nations?
I think NATO is going through a very challenging time where its own relevance is becoming under question. Number one, the United States still calls the shot about war and peace and security in the world. It is not NATO that decides that. Secondly, all the NATO members are basically united against one country, Russia. And that's quite ludicrous to think, because they could not do anything in the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. The same common enemy, and NATO was helpless other than supplying arms to Ukraine, and the war of attrition has continued there. And the third reason is that NATO is not openly against China. And China is becoming an increasing force. It has started showing its naval strength in the South China Sea. It has given indications yet again that Taiwan is a part of China. So NATO is going through very challenging times to justify its existence. The increase in its budget, which will be funded by the member countries. But it will remain. It's not. It has not reached a point where countries are saying we don't need NATO. It will remain an North Atlantic defense organization. But to the extent of its ability to make things change, I don't think that it can play a big role. Even if you look at Kosovo, Bosnia, which are part of Europe. NATO's role itself was hardly any, and it was the US which moved in to solve the problems. So they are conscious of this, and I think at the summit that is taking place, there is indeed an agreement within NATO and US that the threat of a nuclear proliferation from Iran was common to all of them, but now that the United States will probably reassure them that its ability to produce enriched uranium has been put back by 10 years or so long as they are not able to put those things together. Iran will not be a major threat. The threat will continue to be Russia, and they don't know how to go around this country, which is still keeping their energies sapped in Ukraine.
Yes. Do you believe, very finally, we're going to go to a break actually, so I don't want to come back, I don't want to get you to answer a question, but just to let viewers know, what I'll be covering with Sayyid Sharafuddin is what happens next to the Middle East. Gaza is very important, Pakistan's relationships within the Middle East and also with India. Those are the sort of topics that I'll be try to cover with Sayyid Sharafuddin. I believe we do have another guest coming on as well. So perhaps that's going to happen at another date. But listen, thank you so much, Sayyid Sharafuddin, for joining me today and for answering my questions. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, we're going to go on a quick break and I'll be back straight after this.